When things get a little hectic for me and in my busy world, I have to touch the forest, as I like to say. It's a good spiritual connection.
There's a beauty, but there's also a harshness to it. It's like the smell of hot sand attracts me. It's so much part of my genetic makeup.
What comes to my mind is the slogan we have on the state forest about space, solitude, and self-reliance. I think that's one of the things that our visitors really enjoy.
This is Calamintha ashai. If you see this plant right here, then more than likely you're on high ground and you're probably in the ancient island scrub.
I couldn't have been older than 4 years old, and I have this memory of this really mystical place, and the shadows and the moss hanging and the water with crabs swimming along the bottom.
Even though life was harsh at some points, even though it was difficult and challenging and even in some cases cost them their lives, there must have been that same magic when the sun was going down over the longleaf pines.
Oh Lord, with the bounty, please look down on Marion County. The soil is so poor and so rooty too. I don't know what us poor folks are going to do.
If there can be such a thing as instinctual memory, the consciousness of land and water must lie deeper in the core of us than any knowledge of our fellow beings. We cannot live without the earth or apart from it, and something is shriveled in man's heart when he turns away from it and concerns himself only with the affairs of men. Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings, 1938.
You can touch the forest, but don't touch the gators or the bears. The Florida Black Bear Scenic Byway was named after the Florida black bear, which is representative of the numerous endangered species in the Ocala. Black bears, little gators, panthers, turtles, fox, big gators, scrub jays, double-crested cormorants, even bigger gators. Did I mention the gators? It's not the gators that are endangered here. The Florida Black Bear Scenic Byway crisscrosses through the Ocala National Forest and hundreds of acres of conservation lands, rivers, lakes, and forests. While a lot of old natural Florida is being plowed up, built over, and strip mauled away, here along the Florida Black Bear Scenic Byway, you can still find acres and acres and miles of natural and often wild Florida. You can discover a lot of wild Florida along this byway, from the wild animals, to the sprawling natural habitat, to the rowdy history of the daring pioneers who came here. The 113-mile byway runs east-west along State Road 40 from Ormond Beach in Volusia County to Silver Springs in Marion County, and north-south along State Road 19 from Palatka in Putnam County to Umatilla in Lake County. And it includes a couple of additional lakes along County Road 445 and the two forest roads out to Fort Gates Ferry. Ecotourism is at the heart of this byway, drawing visitors who want to appreciate authentic local culture and nature with minimal impact on the natural surroundings. The byway was designated a National Scenic Byway on the strength of its recreational sites and natural resources. There are over 100 sites along this byway. In this video, we'll introduce you to a few of them and talk to people along the way about the stories of the area. These are the 4 kinds of travelers who will introduce you to the treasures of this byway. This land calls out for hardy souls who like to blaze a trail. There are many exciting opportunities to rough it here in the Big Scrub. From ancient tribal people, the Timucuan, Mayacan, and Seminoles, to the early Spanish explorers in the 1500s, and the early settlers and crackers in the 1800s. Plenty of adventurers came here, drawn by the land, the water, and the wildlife. One of the area's unique modern adventurers was Ross Allen. He developed his Reptile Institute at Silver Springs in the 1930s. Today, Reptile Island at Silver Springs is named in his honor. He entertained crowds for years with his reptile shows, wrestling gators, milking snakes, all the things your mom told you not to do.
At one of our forest meetings, he came to it with a suitcase. He didn't know what he had in the suitcase.
Right.
He just opened the suitcase and had about 4 or 5 rattlesnakes, and he'd take one out at a time.
Dana St. Clair is a local author who grew up in Ocala, and his father helped Ross Allen build the Boys Ranch just north of Silver Springs.
I learned a lot from some of the best. Ross Allen in particular taught me directly and indirectly how to survive in the Florida wilds. He had this passion for teaching survival.
Jim Kern was the visionary behind the Florida Trail, now designated a National Scenic Trail. The 1,800-mile trail crosses the byway a few times in the Ocala National Forest. With over 60 miles just in the Ocala, the trail provides plenty of adventure for hikers and backpackers.
The fact that we hunted wild cattle is why we were called cow hunters rather than cowboys. At the end of a drive, it was customary for cow hunters to ride their horses into saloons. It was partially just for show, partially because actually after hours in the saddle, you're really, really stiff. And it was a lot more comfortable if you'd go in, take your first couple of drinks from horseback to limber up so you can dismount. It started in Kissimmee. One enterprising saloon keeper got tired of replacing doors, so he made a door that was both tall and wide enough to ride a horse through, and that became common practice in the interior of Florida for decades.
There are equestrian trails, and the Tram Road equestrian area in Tiger Bay State Forest is outfitted with campsites, corrals, and other equestrian amenities. If you have that adventurer spirit and are interested in off-road adventures, the trails, rivers, lakes, and forests here will provide you with a plethora of backwoods adventure. Many a storyteller has fallen under the spell of this byway, with its rich, deep lore dating back centuries.
Now, we've been driving cattle with whips for several centuries before somebody figured this out. But this connection I'm doing with my arm, that makes the tip of the whip travel faster than the speed of sound. That tip incidentally is called a cracker or a popper. What you're hearing is a tiny sonic boom. Cattle hate that sound, they shy away from it. It makes it easy to get them into camp.
Rick Tunyon is a local novelist who spent 15 years researching the cattle industry in the area to write his novel, Guns of the Palmetto Plains.
I was doing a story on the Florida cattle industry, and I read a book by Professor Joe Ackerman, and in that he mentioned the Florida Cattle Guard, or Cow Cavalry, which was a militia unit formed during the war between the states to protect and drive the herds from here to the rest of the South. And it just struck me, hey, that is my subject matter for a book.
Here we are in the front porch of a cracker house in the middle of the Florida August summer heat. And I'm actually pretty cool. There's a reason for this. It's all about the architecture. They were all designed to keep the occupants as cool as possible. The cracker occupants spent a lot of time out on the front porch, and very often they ate here, they met here, they played music, they danced here into the evening. It was one of the coolest places in the house. Large and often paired windows for cross ventilation, and sometimes a corridor through the middle of the house, a breezeway that was designed to keep the middle of the house cool. Crackers called those dog trots. For very good reasons, dogs used to trot up and down them. Anything that they could do to shelter themselves from the harsh summer heat. And that includes parking the houses under big shade trees.
There are two places along the byway that help preserve the buildings and crafts of the Crackers. At the Barberville Pioneer Settlement for the Arts, you'll find one of the byway's hidden gems. The folks here have been preserving local buildings, arts and crafts, music and traditions for years.
What defines a Cracker might not even be so much your ethnicity as where you live and what you do when you're living there. And by what you do, I don't mean occupation. I mean your independence, your self-reliance.
Monso Tatum grew up in the area, and his grandfather managed crews for the turpentine stills. This is the one at the Barberville settlement.
Okay, this is a turpentine still, and the rosin came through a series of filters into this trough where it was dipped into molds.
Regular annual festivals provide music, demonstrations, and people in period clothes to help bring the Cracker experience to life. Another place on the byway to see period-related buildings and festivals is at the Silver River State Park. Situated near the Silver River, there is camping, cabins for rent, and a museum. The Cracker Village buildings preserved here replicate life in the Ocala in the late 1800s.
There's nothing like the sights and the senses in the touching and experiencing firsthand all of these things that are of our, not only of our yesteryears, but of our current life experiences of being in the woods and on the river.
This is a rare byway with a Pulitzer Prize-winning novel inspired about its culture. Marjorie Kinnan Rollins was so intrigued by the area and the local Crackers that she moved here in the 1930s. For 2 years, she spent time on Pat's Island and in Astor and Volusia, listening to stories that would eventually become part of her novel, The Yearling. Richard Mills grew up in the area, became a forester in the Ocala, and retired here. He remembers Marjorie.
But anyway, when Marjorie Rollins ended up, she was a New Yorker, or that is, and a man told me, when I told him all she did, he said, I can't, that's not the same woman. She wore white gloves. She wore high-heel shoes. She was an office lady. Well, I wonder about that because she went native, that's for sure. Then, of course, she met this bootlegger, Leonard Fitty. He took her to Pat's Island, and he introduced her to the Long, Cal Long. Cal Long then tells her all these stories. Then he told her about the pet deer, and that did it. That's what she was looking for.
Pat's Island is not an island in the water, but an island in the forest habitat. You can hike the Yearling Trail and see many of the novel's locations and visit the cemetery of some of the actual characters upon whom the novel was based. Across the road at Silver Glen Springs, you can walk the Boyles Trail and see the setting for the novel's opening chapter. The Academy Award-winning film of The Yearling was shot partially on location on the byway in 1946.